She was the comet that streaked across the Hollywood sky, blindingly bright and seemingly unstoppable. Jennifer Lawrence didn't just arrive in the cinematic firmament. She crashed through it, a force of nature armed with a preternatural talent and a persona that felt like a gust of fresh, unfiltered air in a stale room. From her Oscar-nominated turn in Winter's Bone to her coronation as Katniss Everdeen, the face of the billion-dollar Hunger Games franchise, she became the most bankable and beloved actress of her generation. She was J.Law, the relatable, down-to-earth superstar who hated diets, photobombed with glee, and tripped on her way to collect an Academy Award, endearing herself to millions. She was an easy star to love, the anti-diva who made the rarefied, polished world of A-list fame seem accessible, even human. For a glorious, chaotic stretch, she was everywhere, and Hollywood, along with the world, couldn't get enough. However, around 2017, the comet vanished. The constant churn of films, the barrage of interviews, the blinding flash of the paparazzi, it all abruptly stopped. The narrative offered was one of a planned hiatus, a well-deserved break. But while this explanation is convenient, there is a deeper, more unsettling story to be told, one that reframes her disappearance not as a simple vacation, but as a strategic retreat from a system whose cruel cycles of creation, consumption, and betrayal she had come to understand all too well. Jennifer Lawrence didn't just get tired, she got wise. Her exit was a silent protest against the unbearable pressures of burnout, the sting of public betrayal, and the soul-crushing realization that the industry that adored her authenticity was simultaneously preparing to devour it. The architecture of Jennifer Lawrence's stardom was built on a paradox that the Hollywood machine was all too happy to exploit, the myth of the effortless star. Her persona was meticulously crafted to appear uncrafted. In an era of airbrushed Instagram feeds and scripted press tours, her unfiltered nature was her brand. She was the girl who talked about getting drunk and falling in a gutter, who openly discussed her love for junk food, who cursed like a sailor, and delivered hilarious, off-the-cuff interviews that went viral. This was not an accident. It was a brilliant, marketable anomaly. The industry, perpetually hungry for a new angle, saw the immense value in her relatability. It made the dystopian heroine Katniss more human. It made her roles in David O. Russell's films feel more grounded, and it made her a public relations dream. For years, it was a perfect symbiotic relationship. The system gave her a platform, and she gave the system a new kind of profitable star, one who appeared to be in on the joke, who winked at the audience from the top of the pedestal. But the pedestal, as she would learn, is the most precarious place in Hollywood. The first major crack in this carefully maintained facade appeared not from a personal misstep, but from a corporate catastrophe that exposed the ugly underbelly of the industry she operated in. The 2014 Sony Pictures hack was a digital earthquake that laid bare the cynical, often brutal mechanics of Hollywood deal-making. Among the thousands of embarrassing emails was a stark revelation. Jennifer Lawrence, along with her American Hustle co-star Amy Adams, had been paid significantly less than their male counterparts. This pay disparity was an open secret, a systemic injustice that was widely known but rarely, if ever, publicly acknowledged by those at its center. The hack forced it into the blinding light of day, and Lawrence, true to her brand of authenticity, did not hide behind a carefully lawyered statement from a publicist. She took to Lena Dunham's Lenny letter and penned a fiery, raw essay titled, "Why Do I Make Less Than My Male Co-Stars?" It was a landmark moment. She didn't just point fingers at the studio executives. She turned her gaze inward, critiquing her own complicity. She confessed that her desire to be liked, her fear of being seen as a difficult or spoiled woman, had prevented her from fighting harder. "I failed as a negotiator because I gave up early," she wrote. "I didn't want to keep fighting over millions of dollars that, frankly, due to 2 franchises I don't need." On the surface, this was hailed as a brave, feminist manifesto, and it was. But in the boardrooms and power lunches of Hollywood, a more dangerous line had been crossed. Lawrence had broken the cardinal rule. She had taken internal, private industry business, the brutal, often unfair mechanics of contract negotiations, and made it spectacularly public. She had confirmed the whispers. For an ecosystem that thrives on confidentiality, non-disclosure agreements, and the unspoken rule of, "You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours." This was a profound transgression. A star who could not be trusted to keep the industry's dirty laundry private, no matter how righteous her cause, was a star who introduced a volatile element of risk. She was no longer just playing the game. She was openly criticizing its most fundamental and most unfair rules to a global audience. The applause from the public was deafening, but the silence from certain powerful corners of Hollywood was telling. The first seed of distrust had been sown. This incident marked the beginning of a subtle but significant shift in her relationship with the public and the press. The very unfiltered quality that had made her a darling began to curdle in the court of public opinion. A period of intense overexposure followed, and a series of her comments were taken out of context and reframed as evidence of privilege and tone deafness. There was the story about a harrowing, albeit comedic, encounter with the cold, hard sand of a Hawaiian beach, which she described in her characteristic, self-deprecating style. It was reported as her complaining about a near-death experience, making her seem absurdly dramatic. There were her candid, admittedly flippant comments about politics, expressing a reluctance to voice her opinions, which were pounced upon as apathetic and entitled in a highly charged political climate. The media, which had built the cool girl persona, now began to dismantle it with the same fervor. The narrative was shifting from refreshingly honest to out of touch. The backlash was swift and brutal. The machine that had created J.Law was now turning on its creation, revealing a fundamental and cruel truth. Hollywood's love for a real person is entirely conditional. They must be real in the right ways, clumsy, funny, self-effacing, but not real in the ways that challenge power structures, express complex political ambivalence, or reveal the mundane, privileged frustrations of a millionaire's life. The breaking point, however, was not a single scandal, but a slow, grinding accumulation of pressures that led to a profound and all-encompassing burnout. The schedule was relentless, from the demanding physicality of the Hunger Games films to the emotionally draining work on projects like Joy and the psychologically intense Mother. She was operating at an unsustainable pace. The constant scrutiny was dehumanizing. The paparazzi were a permanent fixture, and every public outing, every facial expression was analyzed and critiqued. The expectation to always be on, to be funny and charming and relatable at every press junket, on every red carpet, became a crushing weight. She later described feeling like she was under a microscope in a really violent way. The industry, built on the fuel of youthful energy and ambition, had drained hers completely. She was suffering from what can only be described as a crisis of authenticity. The persona she had built was consuming the person she was. The relatable star no longer felt connected to herself, let alone her audience. The final catalyst for her disappearance was likely a combination of personal betrayal and a chilling realization about the industry's fickleness. The public criticism was one thing, but the private dynamics within the industry solidified her need to escape. While never explicitly stated, the fallout from the Sony hack and her equal pay stance undoubtedly altered her professional relationships. The feeling of being a risk or difficult, even when fighting for a just cause, creates a palpable isolation. Furthermore, the disappointing commercial and critical reception of Darren Aronofsky's Mother in 2017 was a particularly brutal blow. The film was a deeply personal and artistic risk for her, a departure from the crowd-pleasing blockbusters. The audience's rejection was vicious. The film was booed at its Venice Film Festival premiere and received a rare F cinema score. The criticism felt personal, attacking not just the film but her judgment and her artistry. She described the experience as devastating, feeling like a failure and a fraud. It was the ultimate betrayal. She had given her all to a passion project, and the system and the public it caters to had spat it back in her face. It was the final proof that no matter what she did, she could not win, and so she left. After the release of the spy thriller Red Sparrow in 2018, Jennifer Lawrence effectively vanished from Hollywood. She took a year-long, almost total hiatus from acting. For an industry that runs on the constant churn of content and celebrity, this was an act of profound defiance. The system is designed to make stars feel indispensable, to keep them on the relentless hamster wheel of fame, press, and profit for fear of being forgotten. To willingly step off that wheel is to demonstrate that it is, in fact, optional. It sends a dangerous message to other actors, that there is life, and perhaps a more sane and fulfilling one, outside the Hollywood bubble. Her disappearance was a silent indictment of the entire ecosystem. She wasn't just resting, she was recovering. She was reclaiming her time, her privacy, and her identity, which had been whittled down to a marketable brand. Her return has been cautious, strategic, and on her own terms. The projects she chooses now are different. Smaller, more character-driven, often produced through her own company. The effusive, always-on press persona has been replaced by a more measured, reflective, and guarded presence. In interviews, she now speaks openly about the burnout and the psychological toll, describing a sense of being owned by the public and the industry. "It was just a loss of control," she said of her pre-hiatus life. "Your body is not your own. Your name, your personality, everything. You just feel like a puppet. By speaking about this, she was once again speaking too much, exposing the immense hidden emotional labor that underpins the glamour. Jennifer Lawrence's disappearance was not a career hiatus. It was a strategic retreat for survival. She is feared and respected in Hollywood not for her downfall, but for her clarity. She looked into the abyss of modern fame, saw the cost, and had the courage to walk away. Her story is a powerful reminder that the most rebellious act a star can commit is to prioritize their own humanity over their own hype.